You guys asked for this video, so I've decided to make it. We are in our second library. Today, we're going to be doing another library tour. As I've said previously, we are actually going to be talking about the fiction books that I read when I was growing up to now. These are the fiction works that I interact with on a more like relaxing level. It's not my kind of academic note-taking kind of books. These are the books that I read, and I find them very, very insightful, but at the same time, they're for a bit of fun. So there's a mix of different books here, and I hope you'll enjoy this video. So essentially, just before we get started, I'd like you to let me know in the comments below which is your favorite angle for me recording videos. Because, as you can see, over the past few days or past few weeks, I have been recording videos in different parts of the house. I sometimes do it in this library thing. You will have recognized this place from making a few response videos in the past. I think the one to Ocean Keltor was filmed here. The first Genesis 1 discussing that was here as well. But I've also done some recording in my study room before. So let me know what are the areas that you actually enjoy the most, and we can discuss on there, because at the end of the day, the most important thing for this channel is to make videos for you, and also videos that you guys like. So as a result, just let me know where you like me recording the most in the comments or on my Discord. I'll happily know which is your favorite setting, and I'll just do that a bit more. So first of all, let us start off with me as a baby. We'll go from me as a baby to me now. The first books I was introduced to were these books over here, which, not the Timothy Keller ones, which you can see here, but I started off with, what was the Detective's Handbook. I remember reading this when I was a kid. It teaches you all about different detective stuff, taught you some kind of things to watch out, makes sure that you're observant and stuff like that. That was very interesting. That's something I grew up with. Another thing that I grew up with a lot was these Chinese books down here, if you can see. Here I talk a lot about Chinese literature and stuff. There are some Chinese classics down here, like Sam Go Yin Yi, which is in English is Romance of the Three Kingdoms. There's also Hong Lao Meng and Sui Wu Jun, which are three like epics. They're like Chinese. If you had to think of what is the Lord of the Rings, what's the Chronicle of Narnia for China, it would be those Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Sui Wu Jun. I don't know the English translation to that, but those are like the key interesting things. Now, I also read, and perhaps that was when I was a really young kid, maybe 10-year-old me, 10, 12-year-old me. Now we're moving on to the 12, 14-year-old me, I suppose. I had this phase where I was really interested in war. And as a result, I had a lot of books relating to war here. You can see here, and I have to admit, these are actually, I'm quite impressed that I actually enjoyed this. I'm not speaking myself up or talking myself up, but I did read some serious academic kind of history books, like Stalingrad, which talks about the Battle of Stalingrad. I remember I bought this in Nepal when I was on a trip there. I was like hiking in Nepal, and I thought, well, I may as well do some reading in the downtime. So I bought Stalingrad in Nepal. There's also a book called War here, and also a book called Thermopylae, which talks about the history of the Battle of Thermopylae. This was very interesting. It talks so much about the different history relating to 300 Spartans, the geopolitical scenario at the time, and that was just phenomenal. Hopefully I could get you into a bit better angle. I'm not exactly sure how to get it to a better angle, however. And then, of course, there is SAS Survival Guide, which is very interesting. Now, of course, here there are indeed a lot of other books, like young children Bible things. Have to admit, I haven't really interacted with them too much. There's devotional for kids here. I know I've read a few of them, but I can't remember enough to actually say anything about it, however. And as a result, I probably wouldn't talk about it here. There's some more Chinese books here that I read in a bit later on. Some Chinese books written in like a more complex kind of language, or also different history kind of discussions in Chinese. Those were quite fun as well. Now after this war page, of course, I floated around with this war phase of mine. Of course, you can see here, there is indeed Guns here, which is quite interesting. It's a book that I read as well. There is, of course, my fishing phase, which I still keep until now. There's a wide variety of books here. There's some great fishing spots. There's some fishing tips. There's some fly fishing guides. And there's this crazy book my dad got me. It's absolutely insane. It's like this 300-year-old book, or quite an old book. You can see it's all wrapped up. Really old print. It talks about fly fishing, art of fly fishing, and a book of angling. It's quite one of these old books which are really interesting. And I got my fishing phase, of course, Hopefully the angle is not too bad. I'm trying to put this back with one hand. Caught that. But that didn't look very good. But, yeah, I'll fix this at the end of the video. Okay, now it goes back in order. Had my fishing phase. And after that, you get to my kind of, still my 12 to 14 to 15 kind of range, right? And I moved more into apologetics. And of course, you can see some of my apologetics books here, some Frank Turek. These are some really young introduction into Frank Turek apologetics books. There's like Frank Turek, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Some Timothy Keller, Making Sense of God. Of course, William Lane Craig, this is great. On Guard, I highly recommend you to read it. Then there, of course, is some Ravi Zacharias books. If you want my thoughts on Ravi, of course, there's a video that I made in the past about this Ravi situation, and I'll send that to you. That was very interesting, and of course, a sad situation, but of course, I talk more about that in that video. Now, of course, there's some more Craig books, some C.S. Lewis, which was very interesting here. There's Mere Christianity, Abolition of Man. I'll highly recommend you to read those books. They are a very good introduction into apologetics. If you don't know what to read, you don't want to read some crazy, really in-depth kind of nature of necessity academic books that I had in the last kind of library tour, library discussion. These are some other books that are very interesting. Of course, you see Sam Harris, The Moral Landscape. It is, to me, very important to read books of people who have different opinions. I'm currently working on some Hume, who, of course, I disagree with naturally, but of course, it's very interesting to interact with those different ideas. Now that we've talked about the apologetics section, perhaps the last part I want to show you is my love for fiction. And of course, I've talked about some love for fiction before with like the Chinese fiction novels and stuff like that, but there is indeed a lot of fiction that I grew up with. First of all, I started off with Lord of the Rings, and you might say, how do you start off with Lord of the Rings? I honestly don't know. I fell in love with Lord of the Rings as a kid. At the age of 7, I was given The Hobbit by someone. That was the best gift perhaps everyone's ever given me. I read The Hobbit, I fell in love with it, then I read The Lord of the Rings. I read The Lord of the Rings 7 times when I was a young kid. I read Lord of the Rings once, The Fellowship to the Return of the King, read it twice, and then 3 times, and then 4 times, and then 5 times, and more and more and more. You can see these 3 copies of books have gone through the thick and thin. They look really scrappy now, but who knows? I mean, they've gone through me with everything. Then I've also, as any Lord of the Rings fan would do, would also read the backing. The Silmarillion is here. Of course, the Silmarillion is way more difficult and different from the Lord of the Rings. It is a completely different idea, completely different story. It's more of the history of these events, because of course Tolkien, the genius of Tolkien was that he didn't only create one world, he didn't only create one story, he created a language, he created a mythology, he created a history. That's just so beautiful in Silmarillion. Tolkien, there's Lost Roads and Other Writings, Beren and Luthien, Child of Hurin, Tales from the Perilous Realm, all of these crazy books about the history and backstory of Middle-earth. It's just phenomenal. And of course I have the Chinese Lord of the Rings copy here, the Mogai in Chinese. It's really profound. And of course I have Macbeth here. Shakespeare is also one of those writers which are just really, really profound, and I highly recommend you to read some of Shakespeare. Hamlet, Macbeth, those are phenomenal stories to read. And then of course I also read Percy Jackson. I was a really big Percy Jackson fan. I read all of the books from just Percy Jackson, Sea of Monsters and stuff, to the Heroes of Olympus. I haven't read the ones about Greek mythology, of Egyptian mythology. However, I've read all the other stuff, and to me, they're actually very, very interesting, and was kind of the building blocks of my kind of philosophy. Not in the sense of that, but of course influences. When you're reading stories that are always very archetypal, especially children's stories, and you learn a lot from them. Now, above this, you see, of course, you have C.S. Lewis. You have Tolkien. C.S. Lewis are really good friends. Here are indeed the Chronicles of Narnia and some of the old C.S. Lewis books about space age. And they are very, very interesting for me. I think that they are, of course, a bit easier to read than Lord of the Rings, but of course they still have a lot of psychological profundity and ideas in them, which I think are just really worth your while. So, like, as you can see here, my love for reading, for philosophy, isn't just in argumentation in the sense of philosophical peer-reviewed journals. They also come in fiction. And I think that fiction is indeed the very best way for us to share ideas and really interact with the generation, because you wouldn't tell a kid or give them a journal, an academic journal, but you would give them the Lord of the Rings. You wouldn't give them an academic journal, but you would give them the Iliad to read. You would give them C.S. Lewis, the Chronicles of Narnia. That, to me, is how you interact with the age. It's how you interact with children, and that's just such a profound thing. You tell them stories, and that's what will really transform their life and transform their ideas. Now, of course, I've talked about it. It's the Iliad and Homer. The Odyssey is also here. I have 3 different translations of the Odyssey, but the Odyssey and Iliad is just so phenomenal, so deep. It's at the core, really at the core of Western civilization. Basically, almost all of what society is built on today, apart from, of course, its Judeo-Christian roots, are indeed grounded, or at least are indeed found first in the Iliad, because the Iliad is kind of the backstory of almost the mythology of Greece. Of course, Greek mythology is so much deeper than the Iliad, but of course, the Iliad is perhaps if you needed, perhaps, how should I say this? If you needed to take the entire Greek mythology and sum it into one story to represent all of its the virtues, the vices, and read the Iliad, to me that is the best way to go. So finally, I would like to talk about 2 books here. There is, of course, La Casa de Bernarda Alba, which is by Federico Garcia Lorca. It's some Spanish books. And, of course, there's this massive Leviathan, not the Leviathan, but it is indeed Don Quixote de la Mancha by Miguel de Cervantes, which is a book very interesting. I haven't read all of it because, of course, it's in Spanish. I'm reading it in Spanish as of now, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. That is my library. If you want me to make any more in-depth reviews and in-depth guides, then let me know. I will happily do that for you. Also, one of you guys have indeed requested in the last video for me to indeed make a video responding to a guy called Forrest Valkite. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten you. I am making that video right now. It is in the preparation. I've completed the notes. I only need to find a good time, maybe a 2-3 hour slot in my schedule to be able to record it, set it up, edit it, and put it out. So feel free to wait for that. It will be coming out soon. And finally, I would like to note and just let you know that I probably wouldn't be uploading any live videos like these in the weekends. I'll be uploading snippets from my discussion with my good friend Warren, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Like always, if you enjoy this content, make sure to like and subscribe. I'll happily make videos for you, and we can build this community together. Thank you for watching, see you soon, and goodbye, my friends. Have a great one.